All right, let's see. Not quite. Let's see. All right, I'm ready.
Okay, go ahead and start.
Good evening, and thank you for viewing the April 1st meeting of the Arcata City Council. As you know, the City Council meeting is being held as a teleconference in response to local efforts to reduce the spread of the COVID virus. We again want to thank the community for their efforts to practice social distancing and isolation as requested and needed. The county order to shelter in place has been extended, and the renewed order underscores the importance for all people to stay at home to protect the entire community and our healthcare system. First, a few teleconferencing tips before we start. First and most importantly, if you're not actively speaking, please mute your microphone. Second, all votes will be taken through a roll call vote. Lastly, public comment was accepted via email and in writing for both the specific agenda items and general comments. Comments on specific agenda items will be read by staff during that agenda items. You can email comments to pc@cityofarcata.org now if you want them to be read and be recorded as part of the meeting. First, please join me, if you would, to recite the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Winkler?
Here.
Vice Mayor Patino?
Here.
Councilmember Pereira?
Here.
Councilmember Watson?
Here.
All present.
All right, we have no ceremonial matters tonight. Next is a report by commissions and committees. We received the annual report from the Wetlands and Creeks Committee in writing as part of our agenda, streamlining during the COVID-19 response. Do any council members have any questions for staff to relay back to the committee? Could we have a poll of this, please?
Absolutely. Vice Mayor Patino?
No.
Councilmember Watson?
No.
Councilmember Pereira?
No, grateful for their work. Thank you.
Mayor Winkler?
No.
Okay.
Next is early oral communications. Have we received any public comments on items not on the agenda for early oral communications?
Our admin assistant, Kayla Johnson, has been watching those today. And Kayla, do we have anything for early oral communications in yet?
No, there were no public comments submitted for that agenda item.
Next is the consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the City Council and are enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of any of these items. If discussion is required, that item is removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. At the end of the reading of the consent calendar, council members or members of the public can request that an item be removed for separate discussion. A, approve the minutes of City Council meeting of March 18th, 2020. B, biweekly report on general warrants. C, adopt ordinance number 1524, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Arcata approving a development agreement for the Creekside Homes project. Waive reading of the text and consent to read by title only. D, accept ordinance number 1530, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Arcata approving a development agreement for the Arcata Community Health Center project. Waive reading of the text and consent to read by title only. E, award a construction contract for the 2020 Arcata Asphalt Grind Out and Inlay project to GR Sunberg Incorporated in the amount of $608,766.60. Authorize the city engineer to increase the contract amount by up to $30,438.33, which is 5%, for a total of $639,204.93 to allow for any unforeseen contingencies and additional work is necessary, and authorize the city manager to execute all applicable documents. F, approve the purchase of one new 2020 Toyota Prius Prime Plus and award purchase contract to the National Auto Fleet Group for a total of $29,114, including tax and fees, and authorize the city manager to execute all applicable documents. G, approve an amended mariculture lease extension through December 31st, 2021 with Scott Sterner doing business as North Bay Shellfish for a portion of tide and submerged land in Arcata Bay. H, adopt resolution number 190-59, authorizing the city manager to sign right-of-way documents with the California Department of Transportation. And I approve the amended and restated joint powers agreement of the Humboldt Transit Authority. And I will be recusing myself on items C because of the work that I do for Danco. And I also will be recusing myself on item D because my partner works for Open Door. City Manager Deemer, could you poll to see if any member of the council or any member of the public would like to pull an item, or if you would like to pull an item yourself?
Sure. Staff is going to pull items E and F. They're both significant budget items before you tonight. And we just don't believe that we've got a full analysis on the financial impacts of COVID-19 to make a solid recommendation for you on both of those items tonight. We did hold the bid process, and we do have those bids available for the grind out and inlay, but we would just like to make sure that we have confidence in bringing those. So we would just like to delay E and F tonight to a future agenda when we have some confidence around our ability to make that financial commitment. And is there any other items, Vice Mayor Patino?
No items.
Okay, Councilmember Pereira?
No.
Councilmember Watson?
No.
Kayla, do we have any public comments on consent calendar agenda items?
No, there were no public comments submitted for the consent calendar.
Okay. Okay, so back to you, Mayor.
Yes, would you poll the council if any member of the council would like to make a motion on the consent calendar?
Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar with the exception of item E and F pulled by staff.
Second.
All right, could you poll the council on this motion?
Mayor Winkler?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Patino?
Aye.
Councilmember Watson?
Aye.
Councilmember Pereira?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes unanimous.
All right, next is a old business, which is open public hearing, receive a staff report and public comment to adopt resolution number 190-63, resolution of the City Council of the City of Arcata to vacate a portion of Sunset Avenue adjacent to the Arcata Community Health Center project and authorize the city manager to execute all applicable, all necessary documents and to execute the vacation project. And I will also be recusing myself on this item because my partner works for Open Door. So could Vice Mayor Patino preside on this one?
Right, thank you. I'll just go ahead with this. This is a project for a new state-of-the-art health center on vacant 1.8 acre parcel located near Sunset and Foster Avenue roundabout. Project would require the vacation of a remnant of the road right-of-way on Sunset Avenue. The action request at this meeting is to adopt resolution 19066. The hearing date for this action was set at the March 4th, 2020 City Council meeting. So I guess we'll have City Engineer Nature Catry give us a report on the vacation of this property.
Yes, good evening, Vice Mayor, council members, and staff. This staff report is a follow-up of the meeting that we had on March 4th, where staff requested for intent of vacation of the two piece of property along the Sunset Avenue. Those two areas are, one was in fee title, one is in easement. And we set the hearing date as of today at that meeting. And just to give you an overview of the area, is the area that we are vacating. It's not any longer required for the city. The Sunset Avenue in that area is fully developed with the sidewalks on both sides, travel lane, and the roundabout. So we will not be needing that those pieces of property for future use. However, we have small area where we have two utilities. One is for the street light and one is an irrigation valve. So we do want to maintain those in future. So we have reserved rights for easement to maintain those two areas. Since our meeting on 4th April, as required by the Streets and Highway Code, city advertised the vacation of these two piece of areas in the Madriver Union, and we posted physically signs at the property. To date, it has not received any comments or opposition on this one at this point. So as a staff here, we are recommending you to open for public hearing if there's somebody has any comments on the project and on the vacation process. And if there's none, then move forward with adoption of resolution 190-63, vacating the portion of Sunset Avenue adjacent to the Arcata Community Health Center project, and authorize the city manager to execute all required documents for the vacation process. Thank you.
Thanks, Netra. Are any questions from the council? I'll start with Councilmember Pereira.
No questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Watson?
No, sir.
Okay.
Should we check for public comment?
Yeah. Sorry.
Check for public comment, Kayla, in this item?
There were no public comments submitted for this agenda item.
And are there any final comments from the applicant?
I don't have anything other than to say thank you for considering this item and keeping regular business going. And I'm happy to answer any other questions, but assuming you approve this resolution, then we look forward to submitting our construction documents to the building department. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. So any final comments from Councilmember Pereira?
Can my final comment be a motion?
Yeah, let me just check with Brett and see if he has anything.
Yeah. Okay.
Any comments, Brett?
No, I do not have any comments.
Okay, Sophia, over to your motion.
Okay, it would have been okay if Brett took it at that point too. Just trying to be efficient. Okay, so I will make a motion to adopt resolution number 190-66, vacating a portion of Sunset Avenue adjacent to the Arcata Community Health Center project, and authorize the city manager to execute all necessary documents to execute the vacation process.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's have the vote by roll call. Councilmember Pereira?
Aye.
Councilmember Watson?
Aye.
Myself, Vice Mayor Patino, yes. Motion passes 3-0. Mayor Winkler will join us now.
Review options for water and wastewater rates for the next 5-year period. Is 1, to determine how much water fund reserve to use for phase-in rates. 3, determine effective date for rate implementation. And 4, schedule the May 6, 2020 City Council meeting to review the draft notice of proposed rate adjustments for setting a rate hearing at a later date. Could I have a staff report, please, from Director Andre?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Yes, we brought this item back after you received the report from the rate study consultant and looked at the potential rates. Tonight we wanted to just come back and focus on any questions you might have or additional thoughts since we discussed this last time. It seemed to be there was a pretty good consensus on the wastewater side. That's a lot of the purpose and need of this is to structure for the treatment plant upgrade project and for debt service for state revolving loan funds and grants that we're trying to combine there. In recognizing, the current situation and the potential, sensitive time for sending out a rate hearing notice, we wanted to talk about options, and the finance director is on here tonight to talk about this in terms of, some choices for you perhaps on implementation dates. And we're talking water and wastewater here. For water, primarily, it's there's a reduction for some customer classes, and it's going to go up for some customer classes in terms of the Proposition 218 fairness of applying, even water use as for the cost of the service across all the sectors. So we think that one's probably important to take care of, since it's been flagged and identified by the consultants as being a little. It's kind of truing things up, recalibrating to be in conformance with case law and state law. So there's some options in terms of wastewater. Really, our current need for you to review the rates and approve a rate structure for debt service is primarily so we can take the state revolving loan fund package and move it forward. We are in line for that loan funding from the state. We want to make sure we keep our place in the line for that infrastructure funding. It wouldn't mean we'd have to implement the rates right away. Traditionally, we do that on July 1 with the new fiscal year. You could consider a delayed implementation date. But even having the step of reviewing the rate structure and approving a structure for a 5-year period would help the city move that along. So at least in terms of qualifying and getting our paperwork in order with the state for funding the treatment plant upgrade project primarily. So there is a 45-day notice for a public hearing that we have to mail to all the customers. We were proposing to come back to you May 6th with a rate notice to look at that and potentially, authorize setting a date. The nearest date or the first opportunity you'd have would be July 1st if you did authorize sending that rate notice out. But I wanted to make sure, that you understood that, and I know you do, that you have some options on delaying this or reconsidering this. And perhaps a rate hearing would be at a later date. It wouldn't have to coincide with the new fiscal year necessarily. Today we talked about potentially, staggering those implementation dates. The water rate true up potentially could be July 1st. Wastewater potentially 3 months, 6 months later, perhaps, if you want to consider that. So I wanted to turn over to Finance Director to go over some of the options that have to deal with the water side in terms of, we talked about using the reserve fund to kind of soften that increase in terms of the, phased in kind of an approach last time. I wanted to see if that was still something you would like us to pursue. So really tonight, determining how much of the water fund reserve to use for that phase in would be good for us to come to an agreement on or understanding. Determine an effective date for the rate implementation, when they would take effect for both or one or the other, water or wastewater, and to schedule May 6th, 2020 City Council meeting to review a draft notice of proposed adjustments. That wouldn't be to set the rate hearing, really, but it would be to at least look at the draft at that point. Well, actually, it would be to set it at a later date, and July 1st would be the first opportunity or it could be after that. That's an expensive mailer. That one goes to all the customers, and it's, I think, 7,500 total. That's a physical in the mail hard copy notice. So, it's hard to know even at this point what type of council meeting we'll be having for that hearing. It could be Zoom, it could be, different format, we're not sure. But I just also wanted to stress that staff was is proposing to do a couple of public information workshops prior to any hearing date that you set for rates, just to answer as many questions as we can on the draft proposal prior to the public hearing. So, at this point, I'm not going to go into too much of the background of what we talked about last time in terms of the rates structure and the amounts, but Finance Director Starzewski might want to weigh in right now or talk about some of the options, especially on the reserve impact.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, Council. I just wanted to go over a couple of the items that Mark had touched upon related to our potential water rates for the next 5 years, and then what the effect that's proposed if you should so choose to use our fund balance or our reserves to help phase in that year one for our customers. So the options presented at our previous council meeting were an option of zero fund balance contribution and covering our cost of service for water. And then the other option proposed was pulling about $1.1 million out of our reserves in order to help phase in the cost of service for our customers. And kind of reiterating what Director Andre was saying, part of this increase that could be proposed to our customers is part of the fact that we're restructuring our water rates from a tiered structure to more of a flat rate cost for our different customers. So just something to consider as to why these changes are significant for the percentage increases for our single family residential user. So those are the two different options proposed at the last meeting as far as what the effect on the fund balance would be. However, we had our rate consultants also run a couple of other scenarios if we wanted to so choose to use less amount of the reserves, but still have an impact on what that phase-in looks like for our customers. So there's a couple of items included in your packet as well for that volume rate for our customers, not the fixed charges based off of their meter size, but an option, like a mid-tier option of $5.50 a month, which would cause an $800 and almost $30,000 drawdown on our fund balance, or a $6 a month or $6 per unit volume rate charge, which would be about $500,000 drawing down on our fund balance. And just to reiterate as well from our rate consultants, if you so choose to draw down on these fund balances, we are still maintaining that 30% set aside of our operational expenses, a little bit higher than I think what our standard policy is at about 25%. So there's some options available if you so choose to offer a little bit of a phase in, but understandably so, even with no phase in, we are trying to maintain revenue, so we're covering our cost of service overall. That was all I had just to add on the fund balance and some of the options for the phase-in for water.
So any other comments from Director Andre?
Just one more, just within the proposed rates or the ones that were being considered, inflation is built into those rates. The last time we did a rate notice, we included CPI for the stormwater utility too. So that's That's not within this staff report, but we're just considering that today. That would be something that would come back to you in May or at another council meeting to be part of that rate hearing notice if you wanted to, if you chose to increase the stormwater fees by I think it's 1.8%, which is the CPI for the last cycle. So I just wanted to add that too. It's part of the package of utilities, water, wastewater, and stormwater that require a 218 type hearing and notice mailer.
All right. I will now ask for questions from the council by roll call. Council Member Pereira, do you have any questions or comments at this time?
Yeah, a question I have, Director Andre, you talk about, right now we're in line for this revolving fund with the state. Just curious, what's the timeline in terms of when we need to be making some sort of final decision to still be eligible for those funds?
I'm going to ask City Engineer Nate Tricotri to chime in because he's been following that process pretty closely.
Great. Thank you.
Hold on. Okay, I'm here. Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yeah, what's the timeline or the hard deadline that we have from the state to still be eligible for the revolving loan fund?
Currently, there is no hard deadline. Our application is in. Actually, we submitted our application early last year, so our application is in. It's a function of how fast we move, so they can execute the paperwork. And as of now, there's money available. So if we submit our complete packet tomorrow, it will take at least 6 months to 12 months to get our contract executed, and we can start drawing money on that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, although, is there a point where, let's say we're getting into the next fiscal year, for example, and we haven't finalized something, does that change the circumstances at all? I'm just trying to get a sense of, it's very clear, staff is very conscientious of the dynamic we're dealing with right now with COVID-19. And so I'm just trying to get a sense of, what we're dealing with the state in terms of our eligibility and kind of, it sounds like there's not a hard deadline from what you're saying, but I guess I just wanted to clarify, like if we're getting into the new fiscal year and we still haven't finalized something, does that present an issue at all?
Well, it will present an issue in our, I would say, compliance-wise, because we have a time schedule for the compliance, and if we don't meet that, our city could be in trouble. But on the financial side, it's up to us because we have a planned project and we need to start drawing money at some point. So we are targeting those dates, and if we don't meet, then we will not be able to meet the compliance date that was set by the State Water Board. So I don't have a specific deadline for that, I would say, but the current schedule that we have and we are following to complete the project, that is I would say that's a hard deadline for us. I would say our initial plan was to submit all the package, which includes our financial packet, environmental packet, and everything needed to get the paperwork ready for executing the contract with the State Water Board by, I would say our plan was to be done by May or June of 2020. So now it's a bit behind, but we are in communication with the State Water Board and they are on board with the schedule that we have, but we cannot push it further out like maybe a year. So
Nitra, are you concerned that that money won't necessarily be available a year from now, the type of money that's available in their funds right now? Is that the concern on the delay?
For now, I would say no. If it was a grant money, because they had initial allotted money for the grant, so we will not be able to get the grant money. But since this is this is for the loan, so there's not a big issue at this time. So even if we are delayed by 4 months, the money will still be there for us to.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Okay.
Council Member Watson, do you have any questions or comments at this time?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Patino, do you?
Yeah, I'd like to say that when I look at the proposed options 1 and 2, and 1 is zero use of our fund balance, and then 2 goes from 1.1 million to 800 down to 494,000 of our fund balance. I feel like with the situation that exists with reduced economic conditions in the city, that we should not be spending much, if any, of our fund balance. So where I am, I feel like we should be at the low end or zero of use of our fund balance. So thank you.
I agree with Paul.
I agree with Paul also. I feel that in the current situation that very many of our residents are being very highly stressed in their financial situation and the threats to their health and their family's health. And also with the uncertainty in the future, that drawing down our fund balance, I think, is not prudent for us to do. So I agree with Council Members Watson and Vice Mayor Patino on this. I would like to delay a rate increase, and I also would not like to take an action that would require us to deplete our fund balance. Any Council Member Pereira, any further comments on this?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the sentiment that right now making a big financial decision of drawing down funds is not the right time. So I think for me, in general, I think a phased approach is good for our community. Obviously, we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, because in order to do a phased-in approach, you have to contribute something from the funds that we do have. So for me, I would really love to figure out what's an appropriate timeline for us to revisit this so that we can still move forward at some point. But for me, it just doesn't seem like this is the time. And I think our staff are obviously very mindful of this too, that this is not the time to make a firm decision about the rate structure, given uncertainty that we have right now. And even I think right now, I think revisiting this May 6th makes sense to just do a check-in. But for me, it just seems like we may not even be at the peak of this May 6th in terms of COVID-19, based on the reporting that we're seeing. So that's why I'm trying to figure out timeline of like, how do we continue to still be eligible? How can we still move forward where we can, but recognizing this doesn't seem like the best time for us to be making such a big financial decision, not only for the city, but for the residents, but also balancing what we have to move forward with our wastewater treatment plant. So those are just some of my thoughts.
It looks like Director Starhevsky, do you have a comment? And then Director Andre both. We'll start with Andrea.
Yes, I just wanted to just acknowledge Council's comments and just thank you for acknowledging that staff are aware that this is, a critical time. We're in a difficult economic climate right now. One of the things I also just wanted to point out as well, if we move this to a later date and time, one of the things that staff is still looking for direction on, besides potential rate increases related to water, are the rate restructure. So I know our consultants brought up the fact that we're trying to restructure these rates, so we're in accordance with Proposition 218, and just bringing up the fact that we're currently on a tiered structure could result in potential litigation for the city. So just some other points to consider as well, in pushing this to a later date and kind of walking through some of that information if necessary as to why we're structuring this the way that we are currently for what the rate consultants are proposing. There are other factors beyond the wastewater treatment plant upgrade for the wastewater side, but for the water side, It is that main restructuring of how we're currently positioned as a city to make sure we're only covering our cost of service for our consumers.
And that might allow some of the phase-in approach that you're looking for would be to do the water rate first. I mean, I recognize it as the wastewater process and project that's ahead of us that we want to move forward. But in terms of, you know, sort of where the city's vulnerability is, the water rates being first and then a delayed implementation of the wastewater, it does delay the project, but it might set the city up better and allow for, you know, some stair stepping. Director Andre, did you have a comment?
Yes. On the wastewater side, I think, you know, although we do have a time schedule order with the water board, and I'll find out more how flexible that can be. It's been a little bit flexible to date, but if we had to go out 6 months on the treatment plant upgrade project, I think, you know, that's probably feasible. I just want to clarify what I said before about the loan package and with the state revolving loan fund. I mean, we have a place in line, we have a number and everything, and it's the implementation date of when the rates would take effect is flexible, I think, but having a rate hearing and setting rates that show over 5 years how we could finance the capital improvement is the main thing. It wouldn't mean that you'd have to, you know, raise the rates. It could be 6 months, it could be 9 months out, 3 months, whatever. It's hard to know what would be the appropriate time right now because it's kind of an uncertain time financially for everybody. So that's I just wanted to clarify that was the important thing, was to show that we had gone through the process and set rates for some time in the future to take hold, because we wouldn't be drawing on that loan immediately. So anyway, I just wanted to be clear on that part.
So any further comments from council at this time?
Yeah, I have a question. So I just want to clarify that there's no urgency in upgrading the wastewater treatment plant.
No, there's a lot that's hanging on that. We have a time schedule order. I'm just saying there's a little bit of flexibility within it, like a 6 to 9 month period. We are working on our CEQA document and everything, permits, so that we can be ready. But in terms of the bidding documents for construction, there's a little bit of flexibility there on deferring that. But I think all the upfront, the permitting, environmental, the loan package, all that, I think needs to stay on, you know, a pretty good time frame. The regional board, you know, we can potentially ask for some flexibility on the implementation of the elements that have hard dates on them currently of when certain things would be ready, such as the UV, the new discharge. That's all they care about. More, it's the treatment quality more than replacing the old infrastructure part of the upgrade. So I don't want to diminish the importance of proceeding full speed ahead. All I'm trying to say is I think there's some flexibility on when the rates take hold. I think it's important to show that we can debt service and have the capital project budget for this 5-year period, especially the next 1 to 3 year first phase one, which a lot of that comes from our own reserve, I should say. But it's still urgent. I didn't mean to say that it wasn't. I was just trying to offer some flexibility rather than July 1, wastewater rates taking hold maybe 3 months after, or maybe, you know, 4, 5, 6 months after. There's some flexibility there. You could revisit that, but I think setting a rate structure that works for a 5-year period is the important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the I guess from my perspective, up until this point, the conversation's been about how, dire the condition was at the plant and how badly we needed to do this project, and justification for all the expenses and this rate study, and trying to move forward as fast as possible. And I think we've talked all along that this was going to be a financial hardship on our citizens before COVID. So, I feel like the wastewater treatment plant's the most important thing in the city, the biggest problem in the city. And I don't know that raising someone's bill $5, $10 a month when we're not going to turn off the utilities if they don't pay it. I don't know if that's a reason to slow down. And I understand there's a lot of uncertainty, but it seems like the only certainty is we need to do the project. So I'm okay with staff's recommendations, and that's one thing I didn't see was an actual staff recommendation for what to do with the rates beyond just review options. So I would like to know what Director Andre and Finance and the City Manager, if they have a recommendation on a best course of action.
I think in terms of our discussions, well, Andrea's put a hand up. So do you want to go ahead? Andrea?
I think, Erin, you're probably better at summarizing the different options available. I just wanted to give a recommendation for what I'm suggesting on the water side, besides what the rate consultants have suggested for funding our wastewater treatment increases. I would say the lowest amount possible coming out of reserves, if council wants to consider a phase-in for our customers, which would be the volume rate unit charge at $6 per unit, about $500,000 coming out of reserves. But I understand in this economic climate, because we're not doing utility shutoffs currently, there could be revenues that are potentially lost. So I understand going with a conservative option of $0 coming out of the fund balance. So one of those two options I feel very comfortable with. Like I mentioned previously, we're still going to be able to put enough away into reserves to have that 30% operating reserve based off of previous revenue projections. We have not done the full analysis yet to see what potential declines in revenues we may have due to the COVID-19 impact. And like I said before, for the wastewater side, I recommend going with what the rate consultants have suggested for our increases of the 10% for the first 3 years and the 8% for the last 2 years.
And I would just add, I think that staff's recommendation is consistent, that to not draw reserves is the recommendation. So in terms of the water rate implementation, that the date that goes in, it goes in at that full effect. I think where we were trying, ideally we were going to have rates that were going to go into effect on July 1st. I think where we're trying to buy some flexibility based on the current conditions of the economy is to look at this period between July 1st and December 30th and say, do we want to build in some flexibility of when those rate increases go into place. For us to be able to work with the regional board, certainty is really important for them. So even being able to get through the rate process, and I recognize the difficulty of sending out a mailer right now to every single resident in Arcata, and I don't want to underscore that understanding. But would be to come up with a timeline where we would check back in with the council, but initial timeline tonight of where we think we'd be comfortable with sending that mailer. And again, you'd see that mailer ahead of time, and then to set that rate hearing. And then even if rates were, implemented immediately or implemented 30 or 60 days after that, to be able to set some benchmarks around that. If we had approved rates, even if they had a delayed implementation of 3 months, that would be very concrete for us to take to the funding source, and it'd be very concrete for us to take to the regional board to talk about our time schedule order. So yeah, I don't want to give the impression that we have years of flexibility, but given where we are right now, we're going to try really hard to buy at least 6 months of flexibility in some of this if we can. Did you have anything to add, Director Andre?
I agree with both the city manager and the finance director there. You know, there's a potential really to stagger and, you know, the rates when they would, the water rates could come first and the wastewater could be a few months later. That's another choice. They don't have to all come at the exact same time in terms of their implementation date. You know, when we developed the staff report, coming back May 6th was to bring you a draft notice of proposed adjustments for setting a rate hearing at a later date. We weren't certain when that date would be, but you know, I just want to, I would recommend thinking about the staggering potential. And I also agree that we don't want to go into the reserves at this point because we're probably going to see our reserves or our revenue sources be lower than anticipated for the fiscal year that we're in right now.
So further comments from council at this time?
Yeah, I have another comment, sorry. Under the staggering model, what's the cost difference to the customer per month? Just like an example. I mean, if we stagger it, we're going to save them $2 a month, or we're going to save them 10.
It would just be I don't have that answer right now. I'd have to look at the tables, but it would mean the water would take hold right away, and the wastewater would just come later. I think it's probably.
Andrea looks like she might have it in front of her.
Yeah. Well, for some customers, commercial, they aren't going to notice anything right away. They may see their rates go down. That's the way the structure is right now. So there, you know, with water, there's going to be an uptick for the residential and probably a downtick for commercial and industrial.
So I just wanted to add to that. So from the water side, if we chose to not phase in water rates, the average increase to the single-family residential customer would be $10.41 a month. If we chose a couple different phase-in options for just the water side, and we wanted to go with the very highest pull from reserves, they would see a $3.45 increase per month on their water bill. The other options proposed are a $5.45 increase or a $7.45 increase on the water side. And then on the wastewater side, what's being proposed right now would be a $5.37 increase on their average monthly bill. And if we chose to do wastewater implementation in January or a later date, that $5.35 would just be enacted whenever council so chooses.
And were you saying that with the staggering approach, it opened us up to legal challenges, or did I mishear that?
I think what it comes down to is that it's the water structure, the water rates that are out of current best practice structure. Our water rates are structured similar to cities across California were for many years, but the best practice right now is to move to this flat rate. So it's the water rates that are out of the best practice structure. Our wastewater rates are not. Our wastewater rates need to be raised because of the critical projects that we have in front of us. So that was the only reason to suggest the water first. But your point is really valid that it's the wastewater project that we want to move forward more quickly. So that's, but on one side, so wastewater being about $5 for the single family residential user. And then on the wastewater side, $5, on the water side, about $10. Those could both go into effect January, those could both go into effect July, or they could be staggered $5 or $10 in July, $5 or $10 in January. Ultimately, they're going to pay that whole $15 at some point.
Any further comments from council?
Yeah, Michael, Paul here. Yeah, I'd like to see the water rates be in July 1st And is there a reason that it's only July 1st, January 1st? I mean, could we do it September 1st?
Absolutely. Yeah, you could pick any date that you wanted to put as a proposed date, and recognize again, we can come back to you several times to revisit that date, given
Okay.
the circumstance.
Thank you. So for me, I'd like to see it be September 1st and be option one with zero fund balance used. For the water, and wastewater to come in January 1st.
I think that's an excellent proposal. That's something I could very much support. I think that raising rates in any way and depleting fund balance in any way in this time of such great uncertainty, I think that we just can't justify. And that if I were a resident of Arcata and saw a rate increase coming to me immediately, I would be justifiably very upset. And I think that this is something that is much more responsible and recognizes the situation that we're in. Any other comments from council at this time?
I just want to echo, I agree with Councilmember Patino's recommendations. Thank you for proposing those.
All right. So next, could staff read any public comments that we've had on this item?
Yeah. Any public comments, Kayla?
Yes. For this item, we received a public comment from James and Joyce Harmon. We oppose any planned increase in the rates at least for 2 years due to the current pandemic. Washing hands at home and at work more frequently, especially with hot water, of course increases use, with water colder in the winter and water harder to get to the faucets when not close to the heater. We have lived in Arcata for over 40 years and used to have infrequent increases in rates due to one-time maintenance needs. The multiplying costs of annual rate increases is a financial hardship for lower income people in need of water to live. That concludes the public comment received for this agenda item.
Right, and back to council. And so would any member of council like to make a motion on this item or give further direction to staff without a motion?
I would like to look at what I said earlier about having the water rates early and then the wastewater rates January 1st. And I guess what I'm looking to do is have staff come back with those proposed rates, and then we can set a date for the draft notice to be sent out.
Director Deemer, do we need to put that in the form of a motion?
I think that's if that maybe we could just do an agreeable result from each of you. I don't think if we've got clear direction tonight, we could bring back on May 6th what that rate notice would look like, how we might be able to language that to the community, and a proposed timeline for you to implement that. That'd be fine.
Do we need a motion to continue the hearing to that date?
No, you do not. No, we'll set the hearing date at that May 6th meeting, and we'll have that be part of your action on that night.
Any final comments from council? All right, so we have direction then. Thank you. And thank you to staff. Let's see. Next is review and continue the proclaimed local emergency related to in the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, and direct staff to continue to update council with actions taken to respond. May we start with the staff report from City Manager Deemer.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council tonight. This item will be before you in roughly 14-day increments. Our municipal code, once we have declared a local emergency, requires us to revisit and basically to confirm the continued existence of that local emergency every 14 days. So I just wanted to review the other piece that's important to myself and staff on this agenda item, continuing to come back to you, is to be able to update you with actions that we've taken. Although I know you're getting lots of emails from me as well, but actions that we have taken publicly, and the ability for the council to give input on current actions that we've taken or future priorities that staff should be considering. So between your meeting last week on March 26th and tonight, there are several actions that staff have taken in response to COVID-19. We have closed all of our public courts, so the tennis courts, basketball courts, and bocce ball courts. We have also done some extra publicity based on input that we received at the last council meeting about social distancing in parks and on trails. We are offering free delivery to residents who purchase compost bins as people are sheltering in homes. And we have established, so Finance Department has finalized a complete tracking mechanism for us to track all of the expenses associated with the response to COVID-19. We have our first filing deadline for potential FEMA and OES fund reimbursement on April 17th. So we're starting to look through the details that are coming out from FEMA as to what might be reimbursable, and we'll keep the council updated on that as we learn. We have expanded some of our telehealth options for city staff. And then we are providing a lot of follow-up right now with both businesses and renters and landlords on the two pieces of policy legislation that you put into place at your meeting last week on the restrictions on evictions for renters with the inability to pay for their rent currently because of impacts from COVID-19. And then on the business resiliency loan program. So we've had a lot of inquiries on both of those and are doing education. The other major effort that we have been working on this last 5-7 days has been working with Arcata House Partnership and working with the County Department of Health and Human Services on some of, there have been larger groups of our unsheltered or houseless population that have started to come together in a couple of sites around Arcata. So currently, we're working on a few things. One is we understand that there could be FEMA funds that would allow certain individuals to be placed in motel sheltering during this period. So that would be based on CDC recommendations, over 65, disabled, or having a diagnosed pre-existing medical condition that puts individuals in a vulnerable category. So we're working with our Arcata House Partnership and trying to identify folks that are currently living outside in these camps that might fall into that category, and being able to do outreach to them to see if that becomes available, if they would want assistance in moving into that sheltering option. We've also reached out to the faith-based community here, and we've done a very complete review of city-owned properties. So the other option right now, the police department did a really good job over the weekend, last weekend, of surveying most of the individuals that are staying between the community center and the annex or near the transit facility. With very few exceptions, maybe 3 or 4 exceptions, all of them were very agreeable to moving to other locations if there was a space that the city could identify that they would be secured through the shelter-in-place period. So we have come up with a list, and I emailed them out to you earlier, of potential. We've got a couple of churches that might be willing to allow that type of, 1, 2, or 3 tents in a parking lot or on their grounds. The idea is that through emergency funds that the county is receiving, we would supply a porta potty and a hand washing station. We've talked with Recology about being able to provide solid waste pickup. We just put a tote on each of those sites for them to use for solid waste. And then working with Arcata House Partnership on visits daily, check-ins for, mental health check-ins, and then some level of food delivery that we could provide to each of those sites. So the sites that we're considering on the city's property side would be our Little Lake site, the Alder Grove parcels, although they're very wet right now. I don't think they would be usable without fairly considerable amount of work. The parking lot near the transit facility, we don't have a lot of folks utilizing the actual parking spaces down there right now as people are sheltering in place. Vinham Park, and then we do have the two other city parking lots, the one on 8th Street behind the fire department and the one on 7th Street, just down here around G. So those are some city sites that we could consider. Again, placing those amenities and working with the larger camps right now just to be able to distance in groups that they were comfortable sheltering in place with. So I'm looking just for, any ideas that the council has or levels of support, or if there are certain ways that you would like us to go as staff. There is a lot of information out right now that really discourages the breaking up or the relocating of anyone that is in an existing camp together. So we are daily monitoring the two sites that we have. And for the most part, they've all been doing a good job of trying to work out, the smaller groups that they feel comfortable staying in a larger setting. But so that sort of concludes our current update on COVID-19. We do have one other exciting piece. I just thought I'd end with something a little bit, it's a challenge, but we did redo visitarcata.com. So we just pulled everything off of that site and we re-uploaded this week current information on every single business that is open right now, responding and assisting the community in COVID-19. So if you want to know how you can get online exercise, or you want to know how you can get takeout food and who's offering what and what hours they're actually operating takeout, at visitarcata.com, we've revamped that entire site to support businesses for COVID-19 response. So with that, I'll turn it back to the mayor and be available to answer questions.
All right, so I'll poll the council members. So Councilmember Watson, do you have any questions or comments about the declared emergency?
I do not.
Situation?
Thank you.
Councilmember Pereira.
I'll just say, thank you, Karen, and thank you to our staff and folks at the county and Arcata House Partnership for working to address our homeless population during a really difficult time. And obviously there's new challenges that are coming up, and just really appreciate the, that folks are coming together to try and resolve this, and appreciate, folks in the community I know have reached out to me. I'm sure many of you as well, with concerns, wanting to make sure people are safe. And I know that's top of mind for all of you. And I know there's not going to be an overnight solution, but I also appreciate the urgency that you're all working with. So thank you.
Vice Mayor Patino.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I don't have opposition to really any of the sites that have been selected by the city as possible campsites. Although I think we should look at planning on paving, grading, and upgrading one of the Alder Grove parcels for a long-term location, because these other spots will be good during maybe the event. But as we know, we are gonna need a larger site eventually. And I think Alder Grove graded and with utilities would end up being a great site for that. So I guess where I would start with on the campsite rollout would be the intermodal transit facility parking lot. So that would be my priority. Start with that. It's something we can look at. It's close by, and see if we can figure out how to control us, keep it being a small site so it doesn't just grow out of control. Thank you.
Karen, you and I have discussed some other possibilities for temporary housing for for the homeless. And I don't know if you feel ready to discuss these other possibilities at this time.
We have reached out actually to several other private properties as well as other government agencies that have properties in Arcata. I just haven't heard back. So yeah, we do have a lot of other hopes out there, but these are ones that I think are concrete that the council could at least give input on tonight. But this is very fluid. So even hearing like Vice Mayor Patino saying he doesn't have concerns about any of those sites, if we needed to trial one of them or two of them, and we needed to rotate off of it into another one, I mean, that type of input is good for us to have. Just as we're kind of making decisions every single day, you know, just trying to improve the situation that we can. But the mayor is right. We've got other calls out there that right now that might be a little bit better than some of the sites that we have on here. But without having any confirmation, I wouldn't be comfortable sharing them.
All right, and also I would very much like to thank members of the communities of very much pulling together. That I've noticed during times I exercise that the even though that my partner and I are walking like 15 feet away from other people, people are being very friendly and neighborly and very helpful to other members of the community. And I'm sorry that it takes something like this to bring this out, but it really shows the inherent community spirit and care for each other that people in our community have. And I'm also very grateful to Arcata House Partnership for stepping up in helping provide services and food for people who are homeless, and also for restaurants who have shut down and have offered this successfully to Arcata House Partnership, so that the food will not go to waste and it will be eaten by people who really need it. So one thing, Karen, to be clear about this is that we need to reauthorize this every 2 weeks. So this is the time where we need to authorize it again. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do need a motion, you know, something like the city council hereby continues the local emergency related to the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic and direct staff to continue to take actions as necessary to respond to public health and safety emergency.
And we also will, since we do not have a meeting, we canceled the meeting on April 15th, then we will need to schedule a special meeting in order to reauthorize within the time required by law. Is that also correct?
That is. So under future meeting dates, my suggestion is just for, you know, at least a quick noon meeting on April 13th. That would just be likely devoted to COVID-19. If we had a consent calendar item or two, we could bring that back as well. But that's up to the council, and we could doodle poll for additional dates. It just seemed like it probably wouldn't be a real long meeting, and we might be able to do it at a lunch hour.
All right, so I would entertain a motion on continuing the declared emergency.
I will move to continue the emergency declaration for an additional 14 days. Is that good?
Second.
Let's see, before we go ahead, well, after this, we can also discuss the eviction restriction. But for right now, could we have a poll of the council members on this motion?
Yes, Vice Mayor Patino,
Yes.
Councilmember Watson,
Yes.
Councilmember Pereira,
Aye.
and Mayor Winkler.
Yes.
4 ayes, motion carries.
One thing that I'm interested in is a summary of, if this is ready to be released, the conclusions of our city council and on how the ordinance that we passed on restricting evictions intersects with the governor's executive order, which overlaps with the action that we as a council took.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and council members. I did this afternoon send you a memorandum addressing this issue, and my review of the executive order it's Executive Order N-37-20 that was issued after the city adopted its urgency order 1532, is that the two actually can work in tandem. It does not preempt or usurp the city's ordinance, and the city manager and I and other staff are working on developing a fact sheet that explains how it works and applies for the local residents. The state's executive order it continues the prior order that I had referenced at our last council meeting, which suspended all state laws that might preempt the city's ability to adopt the local measures restricting evictions. And that earlier order was N-28-20. So the more recent order simply, without removing the important effect of the larger order, simply extends statewide to residential tenancies a protection if an eviction lawsuit is filed for them to be able to defend an eviction action during the time period of the emergency order. Since that's essentially what Arcata has done, and we also went a little further by protecting also commercial tenants, there is not a conflict, and so there is no preemption from the executive order. The executive order also has a few procedural rules of eligibility that are close. They're similar to those of Arcata's, but they are a little different. And my analysis is that the procedural rules that were adopted by Arcata remain valid and are in place. And just to summarize those quickly, the tenant in Arcata, both residential and commercial, is eligible for the rent eviction. The eviction protection due to non-payment of rent if the tenant specifically is suffering an income decrease due to a COVID-19 related cause, or the business income has decreased due to a COVID-19 cause. And it also extends not only to income loss due to lost wages, layoffs, but also then, of course, to the commercial business, lost business. Under the Arcata's ordinance, the tenant must also be able to establish that there is no offsetting income that has been received under some of the various assistance programs that are being adopted at the federal level. The tenant under the Arcata's ordinance is required to notify the landlord before the rent is due in writing with a simultaneous notice to the city manager that states the inability to pay rent due to a COVID-19 reason, and then follow up within 7 days with the documentation that is specific to the individual tenant. So I need to stress that it's not a blanket amnesty to paying rent. It's only for those that are able to demonstrate the actual economic need under the COVID-19 reasons. Those provisions all remain in effect under the state executive order. In order for the residential tenant to have the protection in the event an eviction order is actually, an eviction action is actually filed, the tenant must have notified the landlord before the rent is due, but is only obligated to maintain and retain the documentation, is not required to produce it. Arcata's extra requirement that the tenant produce the documentation, I do not believe has been superseded by the governor's executive order. So we will still ask that all tenants continue to locate that documentation, gather it, and provide it to the landlord. I hope that addresses your question, Mayor.
Yes, do any council members have any further questions or comments by the city attorney on this item?
And we will have one public comment on the COVID-19 response item when we're done with this. But looks like maybe Vice Mayor Patino.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have no questions on it. Thank you.
Any other further comments from council on the COVID-19 situation at this time?
I do not have any comments.
All right, so we'll go ahead and take public comment on this item. Kayla, do we have public comment on this item?
Yes, for this item, we received a public comment from David Lee Love through Laura Shepard. It says, this note was written by a member of the houseless community that is currently at the Arcata Community Center. I, David Lee Love, have taken sole responsibility to speak on behalf of all displaced, talented, and gifted people that have trusted me to be their organizer/director of those whom have come to me for guidance and help, to get them through this inconvenience of social breakdown in our society. It is at this time that I'm requesting permission to see that the people receive donations and formal cooperation of both myself and the community to pull together and see that all of God's children in all walks of life and cultures through this present inconvenience. Sincerely, David Lee Love, Brother Love, Street Minister. That concludes public comment received for this agenda item.
All right. So we need to take action on, I believe, on continuing this emergency declaration and also scheduling a special meeting.
Yeah, you have a motion and a second, I believe.
Yes. All right. Can we have a poll, please?
Yeah, Vice Mayor Patino.
Aye.
Councilmember Pereira.
Aye.
Councilmember Watson.
Aye.
And Mayor Winkler.
Aye. Right, and I guess we could do days of future. We could do the future meeting under future meetings. So at this time, next is public comments, oral and written communications. Public comment was accepted via email and in writing for both specific agenda items and general comments. Comments on specific agenda items will be read by staff during that agenda item and have been. And if we have additional comments for public communications, are there any of those at this time?
So before we get to public comment, we do have one additional new business item, which is adopting a resolution around the policy to install. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. So new business is adopt resolution number 190-64, establishing and approving a policy to install stop control signs at street intersections within the city of Arcata. Could I have a staff report, please, from City Engineer Patrick?
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, and city staff. Currently in the city of Arcata, stop signs are installed on the streets by engineering division, like we make the decision on where and how to put the stop signs. But our decisions are based on the study that we perform, which we call a warrant study, which is based on MUTCD, which stands for Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And this criteria or warrant is used by whole state of California and whole country to install any traffic control devices on the streets and highways. Mainly those criteria are based on volume, accident, and site visibility only. And this criteria, may fit for larger cities all the time, these three criteria, but our city is small and may not fit for all cases. With that in mind, we developed certain criteria. We added some criteria to our policy, which will include not only volume, but if the intersection is in the vicinity of the school, there will be comments from safety department or police department, and our TSC will have some opinion on those. So it's a point-based system to install a stop sign at an intersection. So we have 6 criteria which will combine to a point, which will be a total of 18 points. For example, we tried this criteria at the intersection of 8th Street and I Street, and it meets the criteria. So we installed the 4-way stop sign, so it meets. It's in downtown and it meets the criteria. So we are good. And we have checked this criteria for a few other intersections in the city, and it was approved at the TSC. Actually, this whole policy was developed at TSC last year, and we have a approval from TSC, and as a staff, we are recommending to move forward with this policy, and this will help us to evaluate and install stop signs at the city intersections. Thank you. Now I'll take any questions if you have any.
All right, Vice Mayor Patino, do you have any questions or comments at this time?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for making this change, because now it's not just based on the amount of traffic in one direction or another. It also takes in consideration what's in that location and other points of view, especially from Transportation Safety Committee and the police. So thanks for making this change, and I look forward to it being easier to work with than what we've had in the past. Thank you, Natra.
Councilmember Pereira, please.
I really just want to echo the gratitude. I think this is such a great rubric, and I think it's really easy. I think for members of the community, if they want to, go to the TSC and weigh in, I feel like this is just a really great, easy way for folks to get a sense of all the different considerations. So just, yeah, really excited about this. Thank you.
Councilmember Watson.
I do not have any comments. Thank you.
Well, I just echo the other council members' comments that these are, it's good to have very solid criteria, and so that people are clear on what basis we are installing additional stop signs. So do we have any public comments on this item, City Manager Deemer?
Kayla, do we have any public comment on this item, 10A?
No, there were no public comments submitted for this agenda item.
All right, thank you.
So I would
I'd like to make
a motion on this subject.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 19064 for the establishment and approval of a policy to install stop control signs at streets and intersections within the city of Arcata.
I'll second.
Could we have a poll of the council members on this motion?
Vice Mayor Patino?
Yes.
Councilmember Watson?
Aye.
Councilmember Pereira?
Aye.
And Mayor Winkler?
Yes.
Unanimous and passes.
And now to oral communications. Do we have any comments that have been submitted by the public that have not already been read at this time?
Are there any other final comments, Kayla?
No more public comments.
Thank you.
Right, next is council and staff reports. So do we have any reports from staff at this time?
No, other than just to say, it's been a very challenging couple of weeks, but I think we're getting better at the Zoom meetings. Really proud to be able to move forward some of our city business that seems critical for a lot of members in the community. I've received a lot of gratitude for continuing to try to move forward and yet be responsive to the community during this period. So thanks to all of our staff and to the council for getting us this far. I know we've got still some uphill road to walk, but we are a resilient community and we will get through it together.
Councilmember Watson.
I do not have a report.
Councilmember Pereira.
I just want to, obviously COVID-19 is top of mind for all of us, so just really want to give kudos to the businesses in Arcata, and across the county, but talking about Arcata business. So just really appreciative to businesses in Arcata that are, providing hand sanitizer to folks in this community that are in short supply, and just want to recognize that folks are getting creative on how to best support this community. I just really appreciate that. And so I hope people are supporting our local business community and service providers as well.
And Vice Mayor Patino.
Yeah, I'd like to say, coming from the Humboldt Transit Authority board, our Humboldt Transit Authority is going to cut back their service like we've done with AMRTS. They're going to cut back their service, and they're in the process of deciding what schedule, how late, probably cut back on the late night and fewer runs during the day, and it may affect weekend coverage. Right now, they're trying to make a schedule to keep their drivers working and keep the buses running, and yet protect those people that need protection, especially right now with some drivers might fall into a vulnerable category, and so there may end up being even a reduced amount of drivers available. So you have to bear with Humboldt Transit running Redwood Transit System and all the other systems, with the exception of AMRTS, that there will be some cutbacks, and we'll try to make it so that the bus is still running most days, and we'll see how that works. That's all I have. Thank you.
And once again, I want to thank the community for tremendous cooperation in this extremely difficult and unprecedented situation. And this is a hopefully just a once in generation challenge, and that we all continue to rise to this in this very difficult situation, and we will be challenged more in the weeks and months ahead, and I'm sure that all our community will pull together to keep us all as safe as we possibly can. For businesses specifically, I wanted to point out that there were some major federal legislation that can help small businesses to retain employees who otherwise they would feel that they would need to terminate. And I would encourage owners of small businesses to avail themselves of this funding in order to be able to keep their staff on their payrolls and to be able to continue to pay them. And I think that that's an important step that people can avail themselves, and they would contact Small Business Development Center or Arcata Economic Development Commission. Next is dates of future meetings. First is budget study sessions that we have scheduled for April 30th and May 4th at 6 p.m. online, of course. And then B is we have a suggested date for continuation of the emergency tentatively scheduled for April 13th. And I would like to have us poll the council to see if that date will work for the other council members. City Manager Deemer, could you poll the council members on this?
Sure. Vice Mayor Patino, April 13th at noon.
Yes.
Councilmember Pereira
Yes.
and Councilmember Watson.
Looking. Yes.
All right. And Mayor?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We'll move forward with getting that scheduled.
Right. And then any other, if there are no other actions, so we are adjourned. Thank you all. And as we all have learned to say, stay safe.